In this tutorial, we're going to look at how to do a free transform of a photo in Canva when you need to change the perspective to match the perspective of a new scene. Now, this is sort of an update of a prior video on this channel, and at that point in time, there weren't any really great tools for doing this without leaving Canva. Now, there is a better option now, but it does come with some quirks and some limitations. So where do we find this tool? What is this tool? When do we use it? When maybe do we not want to use it? We're talking about all of this inside of this video. Okay, so what happens in Canva if you have a photo like this that's in one perspective? So clearly this was shot straight on, facing the camera. And then here we have a scene where the wall is angled away from the camera. So we may know in real life, this side of the photo portrait here, this photo frame, is going to be the same length here, but you have something known as foreshortening when you have this sort of perspective, where because this is closer to the camera here, this appears longer than this end of the frame. So we can't just take this photo and sort of put it in here because it's not going to look right, because the perspective is not going to match the perspective of the scene. Now, I talked about this in a prior video, which I can link up above and down in the description below. But at that point in time, when I recorded that video, there wasn't really a way in Canva to independently control these transform handles when I do some sort of distort of this photo. Well, there is an option now, and we're going to talk about that now. It's called the Reshape app in Canva. I'm going to show you how to use it. I'm going to show you some little tricks that you need to know to get the most out of this. But then we're also going to talk about when you should use it, because this is an improvement for Canva, but it is not perfect, and there are still times when it's not going to be the right solution. So we're going to cover it all here so you know when you can use this tool, and when you're still going to maybe want to look for other options, and I'll tell you what those other options are. To find this, we're going to go under the Apps tab, because this is a Canva app. Now, if you've watched this channel before, you know I don't use apps a ton in Canva, because apps are basically things people have programmed to talk to another piece of software, sort of to extend the functionality of Canva, but they don't always give the best results. So you sort of have to pick and choose when you use these, and that's something we're going to be talking about as we get into this particular app. So this one is called the Reshape app, so I'm going to type in Reshape up here, and we'll hit enter, and this icon here, this is the Reshape app. This is what we're going to open up here. Now, the improvement that this app has over some of the other transform apps you have here in Canva is that this one lets you independently control the different corner control handles. Let me just show you what I mean. So some of the other apps have this skew option here, and if you choose this skew option, you can sort of choose like one of the points here, but I can't move that corner point here without it getting really wonky. You see how that won't let me drag that up? So it doesn't really work well if you choose this perspective option or the skew option. It just doesn't give you enough control. So what we're going to do is actually choose this warp option, and when you choose this warp option or the distort option, I don't know why they have both of these, because these are basically do the same thing, where with these things here, if you choose any corner point, you can move that corner point totally independently. Now, as we do that, we get into the first quirk of this tool. You'll notice that I can drag this in, but I cannot extend it past the bounding box that it exists for this photo when I started to use this Reshape app. So if I wanted to put this control point from this corner here, way out here, I can't do that. So that is one of the first limitations, and something you're going to have to know when you use this tool, and you're going to have to plan accordingly. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm just going to hit cancel for now. Let me reposition this photo. If I want this photo here to sort of fit in this frame here, just inside of this white mat, I have to make sure when I start using this Reshape app that I have this photo expanded so it's beyond the bounds of this corner, and this corner, because for example, if I went up here and I positioned it like this, well then I'm covering all these corners, but not this corner here. So if I tried to reshape now, I would not be able to drag this control point, this control handle, where I need to. So I have to make sure that it's bigger than the entire area, bigger than this corner up here. You see, I didn't quite have that corner either. Bigger than the entire area, so that then I can get to those control handles. Now there's another quirk which we're going to get to in a minute, but let's just start with that one there. So now I have it there, and now I want to reshape this. So now I'm going to go under here. I have the Reshape app open. I can choose Distort or Warp. Again, these do the same thing. I'm not sure why they have these different options here. As far as I can tell, they don't really do anything different. They just let you control these four corner points. Okay, now you can see that I messed up already because I don't have this corner point covered here. So somehow I lost my resize here. Oh, I take that back. I was looking at the entire photo here. We're good because I just want to fit it inside the white mat. So I'm not worried about this corner. I'm actually worried about that point down here. Now, so let me just come in here. And the other thing you can do is if you needed to lower down the transparency to see, you could. But I'm going to keep it all the way up here. Let's just go back under this warp option here. And I'm going to start to drag. So I'm going to take this corner first, and I'm going to sort of put it roughly where I want it to be. This one here, I'm going to put it roughly where I want it to be. I'm going to take this one here. I'm going to put it roughly where I want it to be. Now, you'll have to click right on this point, so if I accidentally misclick here, I'm going to move in the whole photo. And if I had to try to hit Control-Z, that keyboard shortcut for stepping back a command, it does not work inside of this interface. So now I would have to take this whole thing and sort of reposition it back. So you want to be a little careful, and you really want to click on that white corner point here and get that and drag that. So the first thing I do is just drag that somewhere within my bounding box here and get it roughly where I want. Now, you are going to want to be precise with this. So my next trick is once you grab the four corners and put them roughly where you want, then I recommend that you go down here, you grab this zoom slider and you zoom in as far as you can. Now I can't see my photo currently, but I can use this little box here, this little scroll bar to scroll over. And then if I need to scroll up, there's another scroll bar here. Or if you're someone that has a mouse with sort of that sort of scroll wheel on your mouse, you can use the scroll wheel on your mouse. And this just lets me get in that fully zoomed in view, so 500%. Is as far as Canva lets you zoom in. And now within here, I can drag this and sort of go back and forth until I see exactly the corner I want to place it in. Then I'm going to use my scroll bar, move over to the next corner. Again, get it exactly where I want it to be. And then I'll scroll down using that scroll wheel. Could also use the scroll bar over here. Grab this corner here, get it exactly where I want it to be. Again, go to that final corner over here. And again, grab it, put it exactly where I want it to be. And that just allowed me to be a lot more precise. So now if I scroll back here to 100% or to fit it in, I can take one final look at it, make sure it's looking pretty good. And then when I'm ready, I can go ahead and hit save. And it's going to go ahead and apply that. Now, when you use this app like this, what it actually does when you hit apply is it uploads a new image under your uploads. So it actually saved everything we did. It uploaded it. So if I go to the uploads tab, I can see that, okay, here's that new version that I just uploaded, and it's got it in the scene here. But you can add another copy if you want to. Now, if I wanted to move it down the wall here, that's not going to make sense because the perspective shifts as we move down away from this. So I would want to redo this again, and I would want to start with that original photo, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So let me just delete this now and look back here. But if I look at this now, so suddenly we have an image that makes sense within that frame because we were able to adjust the perspective. We started with a photo that looked like this here, where we just had this straight on camera facing image. But we have gone in here and we've used that reshape tool to redo the corner points, change the perspective. So now it looks like it fits on this plane here, moving away from the camera. So this reshape tool can be a quick, dirty fix if you want to match perspective better within Canva. When you have a scene where the perspective of the scene is shot on a different perspective plane than a photo, okay? Now, there are a couple quirks with this reshape tool that we haven't talked about yet, and there are also some limitations. So let's get into those now. Now, the first quirk of this tool we already talked about, and that's if we're using this and we grab a corner point here, we are sort of stuck with this bounding box. So if I try to grab this corner point and move it in, I can, but if I try to drag it like somewhere up here, I can't, because as soon as I hit one of these blue edges, I just can't move beyond that first edge, okay? So we'll cancel that. That's just the first quirk to be aware of. But what are the other things we need to be aware of? Well, this transform here ended up with a pretty good result. But if we look at this here, we were basically starting with a photo here that was roughly the same size of the area we're going to put it into. So in other words, it looks like this frame here is maybe for like a 3x4 photo where it's taller, it's 4 units tall, 3 inches wide, or something close to that. And this was at least close to the same dimensions, the same width to height dimensions. It was relatively the same. But what if we had an image that had totally different proportions? Well, that could throw off our result. And there's also another quirk that's going to come into play if we try to do some cropping here. Let me just show you what I mean. So let me just delete this photo here for a second. Let's go under our Elements tab here. So I'm going to go under Elements. Let's just grab this photo here. So now suddenly we have a photo where it's wider than it is tall, which is the opposite of the space we're trying to put it into. So if I were just going to go ahead now and do the transform, let's just see what we do using that reshape tool. So again, we'd want to get these corner points beyond sort of the areas it's going to go into. So I'd size it up like that. And then suddenly let's come back under the apps tab and let's do this reshape tool. We'll choose the warp option and I'll grab this corner point and put it roughly where we want it. We'll put it roughly where I want it here. I'm going to do that with each of the 4 corner points. So this one here, grab it, put it roughly where I want it, and put this one roughly where I want it. Now the next step would be to zoom in and sort of get these looking real good, but I'm going to call this good enough for this example. Just go ahead and click save, and it's going to apply the result. Well, it worked, but what have we done? We've in essence squashed it down because we used the whole photo that was wider than it was tall, and now suddenly we've put it into a frame that is taller than it is wide. So we sort of squashed the perspective of that. So this no longer looks natural. So what were the other options we had? Well, let me just hit Control Z to undo this. So I'm going to go ahead and click Control Z here to come back to before I use this tool. Well, in Canva, you can do cropping. So if I just grab the corners of this, we know I can crop in on this photo. I can crop in on this side. So let's get to something where it looks roughly equivalent to the area we're going to put it into. So this looks roughly equivalent. And you can also get to that crop window by double tapping on a photo. And then of course in here you can sort of drag around, or you can drag these corners and move and crop the different areas. But we're going to go ahead and click done. I like to do that just by double clicking on an image. Or, you know, if you're out like this, you can actually just use these handles like I was before. So that's kind of the easiest way to do cropping of a photo. Now, so if we cropped in like now, what happens now if we try to use this Reshape app? Well, if I click on warp, look what happens. I can't actually see the corner control points. Now they're there if I scroll around, but it's actually showing the whole photo. So we're cropping the image. What we're seeing here in Canva, almost like the image is hidden within a mask, but it didn't actually throw away and get rid of those pixels. And so because of that, we're not going to be able to do this reshape tool. If we are, we're going to squash the image again because all these extra pixels are here. We don't actually yet have an image that's taller than it is wide. Even though we did that crop, it's not going to work now with the reshape tool. So we actually have to get rid of those pixels and get down to an image that is these dimensions if we want to use it and fit it into this frame appropriately. So how would we do that? Well, you could take this design, you could put it on a new page, you could make that page the size of what it is, you could export it there. There are a couple of different ways you could do it, but I'm going to show you what I think is the easiest way to do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap the R key on my keyboard, which is just a keyboard shortcut for adding a rectangle to the design. I will grab this rectangle, I'm going to move it over top of my image, but then I'll go to the position menu and hide it behind the image. Now, why did I do that? Well, here's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to select the image. I'm going to shift click to select the rectangle we just added below it. And then I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose download selection. So the reason why I added that square, that rectangle, is because if you try to download a selection, it doesn't work if you just have a single image. But if you have 2 layers here, 2 images, 2 elements, then you have this download selection option. And this effectively is going to just download the selected area, the cropped area, and it's going to throw away those other pixels. This, I think, is the fastest way of getting sort of a cropped image out of Canva and back into Canva. So I'm going to choose download selection here. Again, it's not going to matter if I make this transparent because, again, we're just downloading this area here, the blue bounding box we see. The rectangle is just going to be hidden behind that. So essentially, we're just downloading our cropped photo. So we'll go ahead and download that, and then it's going to go ahead and save that. And now that I'm downloading this, I'll save it to whatever directory I want, but very quickly I can just go to my Uploads tab, and at least here on the Chrome browser, it's just out of my recording area, so you're not going to see this, but I can sort of click and see my recent downloads and drag the most recent one right back in. And most browsers have a feature like this where you can see your most recent downloads. And then you can actually just drag it right here under the Uploads tab, and immediately it's back into Canva. And so boom, then I can just click on that and add that. I don't need this version anymore. I don't need this version. And what we have now is if I go into crop this has actually thrown away all the extra pixels. So now if I use that reshape option on this, now we're going to have a chance to have something work. So let's cancel out of that. Let's come over here. Let's make sure we're covering at least those 4 corners. So this reshape is going to work. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now, you'll notice I sized this up a little bit. That's one thing to be careful of. What I really should have done was made this photo a little bigger before I downloaded it, because it may have a certain amount of native resolution here in Canva where you can upscale it, but then it may throw some of that away when you download it. So really, before I did that save selection thing, I should have made sure it was bigger than the area we're going to fit it into, just so we don't start getting an image that degrades in quality. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. But I'm not going to worry about that because it was close enough, so we're not going to really notice that here. But that's something to keep in mind. You want to sort of make it bigger before you download it. That way, when you bring it back onto the Uploads tab, you're going to have an image that supports quality-wise what you're trying to do with it. Okay, but now that I have it sized up, and now that I have all those corners we're trying to sort of warp to within the bounds of this photo, now I know I can go ahead and use that Reshape app. So we'll come under Apps, we'll choose Reshape, we'll choose this warp option, and we're just going to grab each corner carefully and sort of put it roughly in place first. So I just like to get within the bounding box to start and get it sort of roughly in place. That way I don't risk clicking outside of this, because if you click outside, it can sort of mess up and then you have to start over. So sort of get it roughly in place. Then you can do the trick here where you zoom in. So we'll go ahead and we're going to zoom in, and then we'll come in here and we'll sort of scroll up to the first corner point here. Again, get it more precisely into place. Then we'll scroll over to the next corner. Again, more precisely into place. Scroll down to the next corner. Get it more precisely in place. And one more to do. We're going to scroll across the screen and then back up a little bit so I can find this one corner we haven't done that. Here we go. And get that into place. And then you can sort of zoom back out, fit the screen, make sure it's looking good. And then when you're ready, go ahead and click a save. Again, at this point, it applies it. You can see here, it uploads it back into Canva. And then, of course, you have this version here. So now, very effectively, we've taken this photo and we've cropped it to proportions that make sense for the scene we're going to be putting it into, the new perspective, and then suddenly, boom, we have another photo in the frame. So this tool can work, but you see there's some quirks as you use it to make sure you can get the result you want. Because if you have a point you want to warp to that's outside of your bounding box, well, that's not going to work. If you have an image and you try to crop here, but you don't actually throw away the pixels in Canva, well, then that's not going to work. So we have to get over these hurdles, but if we do that, then we can get some reasonable results here. Now, is it perfect? No. Let me talk about a couple more limitations and then mention other options you have that you might want to consider before you always use this Reshape tool. Because I think this Reshape tool can work for something like this when you have a quick job that you want to do, but it's not always the right solution, especially for some more complex situations. If we look at this photo now, we have done a good job matching the perspective, but whenever you're putting a composite together like this, you're thinking about more than just perspective. What about the lighting in the scene? So if we look at these other pictures here, we can see that there's definitely window light casting a reflection off these different frames. So we would expect to see something like that with this photo as well. So it's not really realistic in the scene as we have it now. So we might want to try to do something to address that. So let me just turn off this one photo and we'll just use the one below. So the first thing we could do would be to just lower down the transparency a little bit, and that might make it a little bit more realistic, but we're seeing sort of that painting that's in the frame show through, and that's not really what I want. So maybe I need just like sort of a bright window or something that would have a reflection on here. You can see basically you can see window panes in these, so you can see they're basically reflecting this window light here. In other words, we're looking at an angle here, so from looking at this angle, it looks like from the camera angle, we're getting sort of what's in this window here, right? Because whatever angle we're looking at this at, it's going to be the same angle coming off this way, so it looks like it's probably this big window here. So we could look here on Canva Elements for something like that window. So I could do something like Elements. Let me just type in window. We're not going to find the exact window that's in this picture, but we can't see it anyways, and we can fake it a little bit. So let's just come here under Photos and see all. And then also there's something outside the window that might be reflecting as well, but we can just look under Photos here, and let's just try to find something that maybe we could play around with and try to use. So I'm just going to take this, for example. What about this here? Well, I could take something like this and maybe just try to really zoom in on one of these windows here. This might look a little bit like what we're going for. And of course, I don't need all of this, so I could zoom in like this. But you see, since I'm already zooming in here, we can see that we'd have the same problem where we would have to crop this if we wanted to resize it. I could also just come in here and do something like this, and then I could lower down the transparency a lot to start to get some sort of reflection on the photo itself. So it's kind of looking reasonable on the photo. So I might be able to drag in the sides here, drag in the sides. Of course, we're going to have a little bit spilling over up here and a little bit spilling over down here, but you might not notice that. So you might be able to get away with something like that. Now, of course, we've taken the transparency and we're seeing through to the photo below it. So we might not want to see through to the photo below it. So let's just come back here under the position menu, and we could take her and we could raise the transparency back up. So now we're just getting this window light from the window. And we can see a little bit here. It doesn't quite look realistic, so I could drag it in. On the sides, I could drag it in, but right here we have a little bit spilling over. So I faked it pretty good. But if I decided to sort of do that trick where we cropped it down and then exported out of Canva and brought it back in, and then I start repositioning here, it just becomes a little bit cumbersome using Canva for that, when programs like Photopea and Photoshop just allow you to do those things a little bit more quickly. Also, Affinity Design, if you're a Canva user, they acquired Affinity, so maybe that makes sense. But any of these programs are going to be a little bit better at this sort of transform. Now, also, if I transform that, it may not be realistic because we're looking at this window at a different angle, and it almost looks straight on in the frame here. So again, maybe we don't want to transform it, but then I can't erase stuff that spills out. In other words, I'm getting away with not seeing this here, but if I bring the transparency back up, then suddenly we see we do have areas that sort of extend beyond the area of our frame where there wouldn't be a reflection. So if I wanted to just erase those, Canva does not have the best erase tools. I know if you do background remover, you sort of get an eraser, but you're erasing something where you can't really clearly draw a straight line. You can't see the other layers in relation to it. So again, other program, Photopea if you're looking for a free solution. I talk about Photopea a fair amount on this channel. Photoshop if you have a paid plan, Affinity Photo if you have Affinity Photo. Those are all options you might want to consider if the job becomes too complicated here in Canva. So let's just talk about another example where something like Photopea, Affinity Photo, Photoshop would be a better solution. Well, what about a photo like this? So we have a circular frame. Once again, we have a wall, sort of a plane that's facing away from the camera, angled away from the camera. So if we have any photo where the photo is shot at an angle parallel to the camera, we're going to have that same issue. So what could I do here? Well, I could attempt to distort this and sort of fix that perspective using the Reshape tool again. So let me just size it up something like that. Once again, I'll come to the Apps tab. I'll use this Reshape tool here. I'm just going to sort of use the lines on the brick to sort of try to get the perspective that we're looking for here. So this is going to take a little playing around. So let's see, I can see that I want to move sort of parallel to the lines moving down the wall here. And then again, I'm going to have sort of straight up and down parallel lines here. So that's going to be straight up and down. So something like that, that might not be perfect, but I could say that that's maybe closer to the perspective, so I could go ahead and save that. We've applied that now. Of course, I still have the same problem now where I have all this extra space that's not sitting within that circular area, since we're not dealing with a rectangular area anymore. So what could I do about that? Well, I could come in under my Canva elements here, and I could search for a circular frame. So here's this circular frame. And this default circle frame, if you search for circle frame in Canva, does come with something you can sort of resize. So I could sort of make this fit. You may find it's tough to make it fit perfectly, but we're going to sort of get this as close as we can here. And so I'll just size that out. I'm going to do this relatively quickly. So again, it's not going to be perfect, and you're not always going to find it perfect because of the different perspective that we have here with this frame on the wall. But that's sort of close, and then I could drag my image over that. I'd have to resize it within the frame. So let me just scale it up within there. Let me drag out that corner. Let's drag out this corner, something like that. Hit enter to apply. So we've sort of done it. We've sort of matched the perspective of this scene here. We have it within a frame, but it's not perfect. We're not bringing in the lighting because we have the shadow here. So this is just one of those instances where it's become more complicated to the point that I don't recommend that you use Canva if it becomes this complicated. Because sometimes there are hacks, there are tricks like we're using. But if you use a program like Photoshop, like Affinity Photo, like Photopea, which has a free version, then in those programs, they are better suited for these types of tasks. You can accomplish things a lot more quickly. Just to illustrate this, here's the same image inside of Photoshop where I've transformed the image so it fits here within the frame. But then, of course, here I have masking inside of Photoshop, so I could create this mask here to have the image sort of contained within the frame here. And I could do all this a lot more quickly in here, including things like adding blending modes. So here's a blending mode here, and I put this in multiply blending mode to bring back that shadow. And I talk about blending modes on this channel, so I'll link a video up above if you want to learn about blending modes. But just a lot more options here in a program like Photoshop. And also you can do it in a much more non-destructive manner. Let me show you what I mean. All of this is actually a smart object. So I can actually click on all this to access this file here. So if I were to just paste something else in here and save this, so file save, and then come back to that original, you can see that that is actually brought in here. So it's almost acting like a template. I can do things like unclick it from the mask here. I can reposition it on the fly. We're still getting that transformation applied on the fly. We're still getting that blending mode applied on the fly. I could do other things using Photoshop knowledge I have. Now I mentioned Photoshop. There is a Photoshop-like tool on the web called Photopea, which has a free version where you can do a lot of these same things. So I know I could come in here and on this underlying layer, this is kind of harsh, this edge here. In reality, this shadow would be a lot softer. This is actually an AI generated image, this photo frame here. But let me just come in here and select that edge. So since I know these tools in here, I could do something very quickly, like make sure I have this layer selected here. We'll turn on this layer, but we'll apply it to this layer here. And we'll go filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And so very easily I could bring that soft edge just to make this look better. So again, non-destructive editing, more flexible editing. You just have a lot more options when you start wanting to do things that are a little bit more complicated. So the Reshape tool in Canva definitely marks a step forward in the options we have in Canva in terms of changing the perspective of an image. But is it something you should use blindly for every project? No. As I always do on this channel, I'm coaching you to use Canva for what it's good at, but then also be willing to find those other software, the other tools that support Canva and extend your capabilities. So if you're interested in learning any of that other software, let me know below what you use and whether you want to hear any more tutorials on that sort of software, and I can try to do more content about that on this channel. Also, I have a free resources page with lots of cool Canva free resources, which you can get access to just by signing up for my free Canva newsletter. So I'll post a link to that down below in the first pinned comment. Thanks again for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe if you like tutorials like this, and I will see you soon.
Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so descriptive like an adjective. I got a vendetta against people who patented being negative when you should be getting after it. I got facts over tracks, this and that, spitting slow, spitting fast. I could roast, I could gas, think I'm okay at last, but I don't know if that can erase all the past.